Good evening, Chodesh Tov. We enter the final month of the year. It's the month of Elul. And I must say, it's always the month that creates a bit of a pit in the stomach. The mention of Elul, in fact, I mused about this out loud in my weekly message in Shul newsletter, which some of you may have read. What is it that creates the unease? And I was finally able to put my finger on it when I found a solution. Sometimes you need to know the problem, you need to find a solution in one. I want to do some revision because we did Elul in acronyms a year ago for those who attended that shiur, and so very quickly, this is what we spoke about Elul and those letters Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Lamed, and what they signify. So the one, here we have Inali Adova Samtilah. You can see that spells Elul, Aleph, Lamed, Vav, and Lamed. And that is actually a quote from the verse of relating to cities of refuge, somebody who has unfortunately committed an act of manslaughter with that real intent, definitely no malice. And that's the idea that the month of Elul is a city of refuge to which you escape, kind of a refuge in time. Anila Dodiva Dodili, which speaks of the relationship we have with Hashem, which is heightened. It comes from Shir Hashirim, Song of Songs, speaks about the relationship we have with Hashem, and I've lost the mouse. There we go. Ani, Ledodi, Vedodili. So that's kind of the idea of Teshuvah, becoming closer to Hashem, as happens in that month. Ish L'Rei Matanot Levyonim, that is actually the concept of charity, and it comes from the Megillah of all places, where, here we go, Ish is Aleph, Lamed, Vav, and Lamed, and then finally the concept of prayer, which comes from a song again, in the wrong order, Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Lamed, but again we have it here, Ashira, La Hashem, and here we got the translation there, and then Vayomru, Leimor, so the idea of singing praise of Hashem. So those are the dimensions of Elul that we spoke about a year ago. And all those kind of combine to create that unease, that pit in the stomach. It's a month of compassion. It's a month of reckoning, accounting. Oh, that's horrible, because we don't really want to do a reckoning. We don't like to do accounting when we know that we're going to score well. So a business that runs well, that's making a profit, people will call the auditors in and say, let's have financials. Business is not going to reflect nicely. You kind of dread the auditors coming in. You don't really want to do that self-reckoning because it makes you feel uneasy, it makes you feel uncomfortable. And there's so much emphasis on the month of Elul and on that soul searching and being honest with ourselves and who are we, and maybe we don't like who we are in terms of the spiritual level that we at. And that's why it's such a difficult process, because we've got to reflect back on the whole year. There's a popular saying, I'm not sure I was able to locate the author of it, but there's a verse that describes the land of Israel, actually, but it says that the eyes of God are upon the land, Mereshit Hashana ve'ad Achrit Shana, from the beginning of the year until the end of a year. Now, grammatically, that's incorrect. You would either say that doesn't sound right. You would say either from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, or you would say from the beginning of a year to the end of a year, but you don't kind of mix the definite article with the indefinite in the same sentence without creating that lopsidedness, which is actually that Elul syndrome. Every year, we start our year, Reshit Hashana, beginning of the year. This, 575, 5783. We were all there. Rosh Hashanah, 11 months ago. This will be the year when we're going to be different. We're going to accomplish. We're going to achieve. We're going to grow. We're going to learn. We're going to do mitzvahs. We're going to improve. We're going to be different people. By the time we get to month number 12, that impetus has petered out, and we're just left with having been a year. And that's the kind of the dissonance of Elul. What it should have been, and what you got to come to terms with, that it really is, and that does not feel good. So I'm going to introduce you now to I think I showed you 4 acronyms, and those go way back to the Ari, and they are all verses from the Torah. I'm going to introduce you to a 5th Elul acronym that is not as famous, but when I read about it, in fact, I heard about it this morning, and I started doing some research. It's actually a very powerful message. It's one that comes to us via, and let's go back here to our slides, if I can find them. It comes from a great rabbi called the Megaleh Amukot, Rabbi Natan Nota Shapiro, who lived, at the end of the 16th, 17th century. There are no known photographs, but this is the picture of his book, which is called the Megaleh Amukot. Literally, that means he uncovers deep things, depths. And the tombstone on the left is his. And I'm going to zoom in on it because it's powerful wording on the tombstone, and it's not very clear because those are old ancient photographs. I think they were knocked down during the war. But here, Megaleh Amukot, he is one who uncovers deep things. Ushamrim alav shedibei Eliyahu Navi. It is said about him that he spoke to Elijah, and then here's his name. You may be able to see Shapiro here. He was the rabbi of Krakow, in the 17th century. Many famous descendants. The Jonathan Eibeshitz, descendant of his, the Divrei Chaim of Tzadz, Hasidic Rebbe Pilchus of Koritz, you may have heard of, Menachem Mendel Rimanov, and probably the one that's going to resonate with us is Rabbi Shapiro, same names. Obviously, he's a patrilineal lineage. Meir Shapiro of Lublin, who founded that yeshiva in Lublin called Chachmei Lublin, and actually founded the study of Daf Yomi. I'm going to digress for a moment because the picture had 2 tombstones, and I want to tell you the story of the tombstone on the right. Tombstone on the right is an anonymous tombstone, and it reads the following: in vain we tried to find the name of the person who lies here, and we were unable to. And then they quote, paraphrase from the book of Eov, Yagid Alav Re'o. You can tell who he is by the company he keeps. And that is that he is next door, Gaon Moreno, Megaleh Amukot. He's the next door tombstone to the Megaleh Amukot. It appears that the Megaleh Amukot, Rabbi Shapiro actually asked for the plot next to him to remain empty for whatever reason. And one long after he passed away, a young man looked like an absolute pauper arrived, and he asked to see the head of the Chevra Kaddish, and he said he'd like to book a spot next to this great rabbi. The fellow from the Chevra Kaddish thought this was a joke. He said, forget about it. There's a great rabbi. We're waiting for, maybe a great tzaddik one day will give us an indication he belongs there, but we're not going to, just give it to you because you're some schlepper, schnorrer young man. The fellow said he was prepared to pay any price. And they agreed on an exorbitant sum of money, which I think the Chevra Kaddish threw out there just to fob him off. It was 1,000 gold, whatever notes or the equivalent, which he took out of his briefcase and paid, and ended up with a contract for the purchase of that plot. the head of Kadisha had kind of a dilemma, but the guy was young and he was a bit older. He thought, okay, I've just made 1,000 for the Kadisha, and this guy's going to outlive me, by decades, and it'll be somebody else's problem, and let's move on. But he died that night. And they then had an emergency discussion, a meeting, and they decided to disregard the incident and to bury him in a pauper's grave on the side of the cemetery. I don't want to waste too much time on this, although it's an amazing story. This fellow came to haunt the head of Chevy Kadisha in his dreams night after night in a row, claiming his burial plot and, telling him they made a deal and he had to abide by it, eventually repeatedly saying he demands a din Torah where his case will be heard. So the head of Chevy Kadisha promised him a din Torah, which was taken to Rabbi of Krakow at the time, Rabbi Yosef, also known as the Bach. He's a great commentator on the Shulchan Aruch. And the Bach ruled the following: the grave is there, it's free. He can move if he wishes. We're not getting involved. So that's kind of a cop-out, you would have thought, except that the following morning, they found that the earth next to the Megillah Amukot had visibly moved, and when they looked at the original grave of this pauper, he was no longer there. So very clearly he was some hidden tzaddik, but of unknown name. And so all we can say about him is the company he keeps says it all. Now let's come back to what we really want to discuss is what the Megillah Amukot has to say to us about the month of Elul. And here it is. This is the acronym. Aron, Luchot, Veshivrei Luchot. That translates as the Ark, Holy Ark, tablets, and the broken tablets. Now, where does this expression come from? The Ark, the tablets, and the broken tablets. There's a story in the Talmud. It's an aphorism. It's in Brachot. And one of the rabbis there, I don't think we have his name here, no, because he mentioned his name in the previous statement he made. Is the second one. Oh, there we go. We should be in the translation. We have him. Should be further advised. Be careful about an elder who has forgotten his Torah knowledge, due obviously to dimension circumstances beyond his control. And he says the reason for, as we say, the tablets of the covenant and the broken tablets were both in the ark. So the idea is that a scholar who has lost his wisdom is not to be discarded. He's like the broken tablets. They don't contain the kedusha. So the Talmud is actually telling us something which we knew, which is mentioned elsewhere, and that is that the broken tablets were actually placed in the ark along with the second set of tablets. Now let's try to understand the significance of this. So historical sequence, and the last year we had, which was the 15th of Av, so that was 2 weeks ago, and discussing the value of the second tablets. But Shavuot got the Torah. 40 days later, major breakdown. We're dancing around the golden calf. 17th of Tammuz, the tablets were broken, and then it begins rebuilding, and eventually we end up with on Yom Kippur the second set of tablets. So there is the broken tablets, which signify our betrayal, but it's more than that. It's more than just it signifies the betrayal. The second tablets, or the broken tablets, sorry, or here, when Hashem tells Moshe to carve out the new tablets, right? And then he says, I will then write on those tablets the words that were on the original tablets, Asher Shibarta, which you have broken. Okay. Now, I remember it was Rashi, but it's actually not Rashi on this verse. It's Rashi on the very last verse of the Torah, where Rashi tells us that God approved of Moshe breaking the tablets. The last verse of the Torah, It talks about the strength that Moshe showed before the eyes of all the Israel, and that's the fact that he actually broke the tablets before them. And those words, Asher Shibarta, which we just saw in the original text, Exodus 34, actually means, and Rashi uses an expression we use in Shul every Shabbos lots of times, Yasher Kochacha, means strength befitting. In other words, I prove, Shkoyach, right? We say in South Africa, Shkeach. Thanks and congratulations, you broke the Luchot. And that's actually from the Talmud in the Yevamot and in Shabbat. Was Hashem saying, I approve? When Hashem uses the words we had here, Asher Shibarta, he's saying, I approve, I agree with you breaking the tablets. And the parable that's given is of a marriage which takes place, and then there's infidelity. What does the good friend, maybe the best man of the groom do, or rather in this case it was the bride who was unfaithful? So the maid of honor will quickly go and try and obtain the marriage contract and rip it up, as if to kind of void the marriage retroactively, to lessen the offense. So yes, the breaking of the tablets was a powerful act of Moshe's self-sacrifice. I mean, he had done everything to get the Torah. This was his moment of glory, and as get those tablets, he doesn't know the end of the story, which we know so well. He's going to get a second set. As far as he's concerned, ois, I worked so hard on bringing the Jews out of Mitzrayim, and this was the accomplishment, the achievement. We're at Mount Sinai. I've got the tablets. The relationship with God is now about to be taken to the highest level, and I break them. Then there is repair afterwards. But here's a question. Yes, there was a second set of tablets. The relationship was repaired. And as we discussed 2 weeks ago, which is the real powerful marriage, the second one. It's a private celebration, but it's the most powerful because that's the relationship which has been rebuilt. But would it occur to anybody to take the ketubah of the first marriage, try and stick the pieces together and frame it and hang it up, maybe in the bedroom? I mean, it would be completely out of place to have a reminder of that failure. What are we being told over here? We're being told, take those broken tablets, collect those broken pieces, and put them in the Holy Ark together with the second set of tablets, the complete ones. Aron, Luchot, the Shivrei Luchot, Aleph Lamed Vav Lamed. That's Elul. What is that? That is embrace your mistakes and build from them and move on. Don't let your mistakes drag you down, destroy you, but learn from them to grow. And that's the month of Elul. That unease we're feeling. We have to turn that into, yes, it's just Shana, it's not Hashanah. Let me share a story or two, depending on how time goes, on embracing mistakes. And the one is about the great Rabbi of Vilna. We move away from Poland and back north. Great Rabbi of Vilna, well, he wasn't the Rabbi of Vilna. He was just a rabbi in Vilna. He's called the Shalom Strashun, also known as the Rashash. Rashash is well known to anybody who studies yeshiva, because his commentary somehow managed to make it into the volumes of the standard Vilna edition of the Shas of the Talmud. Now, how did that happen? So he was a wealthy man, and on the side, he sat and studied Torah, but he also ran a free loan. So people used to come from the community, borrow money from him, and then return it, etc. So the butcher of the town arrives one day, borrows a substantial sum of money in order to run his business, and a few months later, he returns the money as the Rashash is engrossed in his studies, takes the money, puts it in the back of the book he's studying, and forgets to make a note of the repayment. And sometime later, when he's going through his books, he contacts the butcher and says, "Hey, you never paid me." And the butcher tries to remind him that he paid him, he brought him the money. Eventually, this ends up in a dispute. I'm not sure whether he paid him again or not. That's not relevant, but the point is, he was totally discredited in the community. His business closed. He had to move to a neighboring town, and it was the hugest embarrassment that he had kind of they had called the great rabbi a liar. A couple of years later, Reb Shalom is studying from the same volume that he was reading on that day of the loan repayment, and suddenly he finds a wad of money. It all comes back to him, and he comes crying and begging for the butcher's forgiveness. He says, "I will tell everybody, and I will rehabilitate you." And the butcher says, "Look, I'm going to accept your apology, but I'm ruined. I tried to open a butchery in a neighboring town, but my reputation preceded me, and it's not going to work." And eventually, Reb Shalom says the following. He says, "Look, let me tell you something. You have a son, and I have a daughter. Let's make a shidduch. And everyone will know that, my forgiveness of you is complete." And that's what happened. Now think about this. This mistake, this distraction, this, having forgotten that he had, paid money or received the loan repayment, cost him that this daughter of his, who could have gone into the biggest yeshiva in Vilna and walked out with a top student, ended up marrying the butcher's son. It must have eaten him up. Okay, now let me share with you who his daughter was. His daughter's married surname was Rum. She's known as the Rum widow. She and her two sons owned a printing press in Vilnius, and they actually were the first to print the Vilna edition of the Talmud. Okay, this is the Rosh Hashanah volume. You can see it's in Vilna, and I think we can zoom in on it. Yes, Vilna. It is actually printed and published. Ha'almana, the widow, the Achim and the brothers, Ram. So she had two sons. Don't know what happened to the butcher's son, but this is the Rosh Hashanah's daughter, who was Mrs. Rum, the one who published the Vilna Shas and many other holy books. If you look on page 2 of any book of the Talmud, you will see that incorporated besides the text of the Talmud, there is, it's a bit small, but you can probably see Rashi, Tosfot, many other commentaries. And then in the back of the book, there are also some commentaries, and there's some classics. Okay, there is Mahashal. I don't know if those names are going to, ring familiar to anyone who's not studying the Talmud. And you can see this is Vilna, published by the widow and brothers. Run there at the bottom, at the very back of the book, number 21. Chidushei v'Hagot HaRashash. That's Rabbi Shmuel Strashon. So Reb Shmuel would have probably, with like many writers of commentaries in the Talmud, ended up, forgotten about in oblivion, or some knowing about him, others not knowing about him. Every yeshiva student knows about him, and because his daughter was the owner of the printing press, so she was a publisher of this particular edition of the Talmud, which has become the standard edition of the Talmud. Let me tell you about another mistake. Totally different nature. This is probably a funny one, but we're probably all familiar with this product, designed only in the 70s, 1968. A scientist at 3M, Spencer Silver, was trying to design a new glue formula and he worked very hard, but he was failing because his glue kind of held papers together. But if you wanted to separate them, you could. It wasn't a permanent glue, and so his formula was kind of shelved in the file somewhere. Until somebody thought, wait a second, this is amazing because you can make bookmarks, you can make post-it notes. His project was a failure, that's Spencer Silver's, but it ended up being something that we kind of, all have. Yeah, I've got a yellow one too. There is the post-it. So that was Spencer's mistake. That's what the month of Elul is about. The luchot and the broken luchot. When we come to the end of the year, this is our story. We start the beginning of the year on top of Mount Sinai. We end up at the end of the year dancing around the golden calf. It's history repeating itself. We start out with good intentions, with powerful energy, and we draw from our holidays, and we come away, walking out from Simchas Torah with the resolutions about this year is going to be, and there's so many resolutions, and there's so many, positive ways in which we're directing our life, and then we lose the impetus. And by the end of the year, we kind of look back, and it makes us very uncomfortable. Soul reckoning, soul searching, to rebuild ourselves, but it's a painful process. We told the luchot, that represents the Torah, of course, the mitzvot, the tablets, shivrei luchot, the broken pieces, which represents failures. They all go into the ark together. What's the ark? The ark is a unique property. And that's the power of what Elul can do for us. The ark was, what's the right word? Immeasurable, or rather unmeasurable. In other words, if you the ark, if you took a ruler and you measured, because it was rectangular, but you use the ruler to go from here to here, there'd be a measurement. However, if you measure the entire width of the room from one end to the other, and then you also added up the measurements of the one end to the room to the beginning of the ark, and then from there to there, it added up to the same thing. So it was kind of, laws of nature didn't apply in the Holy of Holies. So the ark was measurable but not measurable. It had a width, but then that width didn't take away from the total width across the entire room, from here to here. That's the power of infinity. It's the power of something being made into nothing, but it's there. That's the power of Elul, that compassion of Hashem looking down upon us. So yes, we've got to do the soul searching. We've got to do the personal reckoning, because we've got to take the shivrei luchot. We've got to take the mistakes we made in the course of the year. We've got to acknowledge them. We've got to realize that they can become something very useful. They can be a building point. They are not things that are going to drag us down and destroy us, but rather something that we're going to put together with the luchot, with that new relationship with Hashem that we're reestablishing. And with that, we take the month of Elul and create unbelievable power and powerful energy with last year's resolutions and what we did or didn't do. And this coming year's resolution, we will build ourselves up towards the K'tiva V'Chatima Tova, and we will be blessed indeed to be sealed and scribed in a new good year for all good things that we wish ourselves. Good night.